Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Economic Developers Council of Ontario, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's Trade and Tariff Virtual Roundtable discussion. We're pleased to have you join us today and participate, and today's session will be recorded, and the recording and a white paper reviewing today's session will be available on our website following. We also are in the process of scheduling our next roundtable. It'll be in October, and we'll send that information out following today. So Ontario has been very busy actively reshaping its trade and tariff strategy in response to the escalating international tensions, particularly when it comes to the United States. We've seen the work with the Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, along with Invest Ontario, and how they are promoting Ontario and Canada, and with great success. So thank you so much for all of your commitment to strengthening Ontario's economic development, and we're, rolling with the punches as each day goes on. Today's roundtable discussion, we have Brock Dickinson back to lead this session, and my sincere gratitude to Brock for always coming and taking the charge and bringing such interesting information. And we also have Janet Song here today to share the information that she discussed last time about the Supply Chain Resiliency Guide. And I look forward to the discussions. I look forward to hearing from all of you and to seeing what's happening across Ontario and how we can better support you. So thanks again for being here. And at this time, I'm going to pass it over to you, Brock.
Right, perfect. And I'm going to apologize. It's my fault that you're all a minute or two late coming in. I had a system crash and a last-minute reboot. So apologies to Stephanie and Laura for giving them heart attacks as we get underway. But I do appreciate the chance to be here. And as always, I just want to share a couple of ideas before we launch into the main discussion. So I am going to try to share my screen without sort of knocking the system down again.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. And
I can see your screen, but not your presentation.
right. Yeah, this is when you get insight into all the stuff that's going on in the background. Can I maybe just ask, as this system boots back up, that maybe Janet can kind of share some of the discussion of the supply chain stuff first, and I'll try to get this sorted in the background here.
Absolutely. So Janet, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Well, thank you, Brock, for passing it to me. I'm now going to share my screen, and I hope I don't repeat anything that you're going to say, but let's get started here. So can you see my screen?
Yes, it's in presentation mode.
Great. So today I just wanted to share a little bit about the report that I've been working on and how to use that report. So I want to bring forward some context. I have been working on projects that focus on building resilience in the Canadian economy, specifically on how SMEs can plan for tariff threats and why waiting until tariffs hit is too late. So the background of where I'm coming from is I've led the Localizing Canadian Supply Chain Speaker Series with York University, and it focused on understanding impacts of US tariffs, where I invited 18 plus industry experts to speak on 6 key sectors. And why this matters, as you know, over 98% of our employer businesses are SMEs, and we have a highly integrated US US-Canada supply chain, and this leads to ripple effects. So anything that does have tariffs will hit any industry, which could lead to increased costs, reduced demand, economic slowdown, further snowballing to economic impacts with potential recession, mass layoffs, and business closures. So as of today, what is currently tariffed? And please do correct me if I missed something that just occurred right now. Or maybe I missed something. That is okay. Please put that in the chat. But I'm just highlighting the fact that currently we have 50% US tariffs on steel and aluminum and semi-finished copper products like pipe, wires, and even if they're CUSMA compliant, so even if there's that trade agreement between US, Canada, and Mexico, even if they're compliant, they still are tariffed, some of them in specific ways. 40% on transshipped goods. So if you try to bypass it through another country, still gets tariffed if they find you. 35% US tariffs on Canadian goods that are exempt from CUSMA. And 10% tariffs on Canadian energy and critical minerals, again, CUSMA exempt, and then up to 47% of US duty on Canadian softwood lumber. And I just want to highlight really quickly about the SME that's impacted by these tariffs. And I'm just going to use this case study to show how you can use my report that I made in partnership with CFAL York. So a quick little highlight is agri-food and seafood sector. There's no direct impact of a specific tariff on them yet, but in China did put tariffs on seafood exports, which is their biggest partner. So tariffs are coming even if it's not US. And 1 in 10 jobs are taking place in the sector in Ontario alone, and US is over 59% billion market. A little bit of context for you just to know how much we need, like our US supply chain is so tight, is the fact that 90% of output exported to US. So it's highly vulnerable to policy shifts. And over the past 20 years, there has been a major trade deficit from the US, which means that they are taking more agri-food products from Canada than Canada is taking from the US, which means we have such a highly integrated logistics system. If we lose part of this market share, we lose supply, raises prices, inflation of agri-food products. So why waiting until tariffs hit is too late is because, one, food perishability risks. So think of a truck going through the border and then it gets stopped. That can lead to spoilage and lost values. There's delayed shock waves with tariffs can hit months later after inventory dries up. So like supermarkets, they have a just-in-time system. So 6 weeks, and then that stock is gone. And then 3 is current tariff ripple effects. So steel, aluminum tariffs affect packaging, think of canned goods, and operations, think of the machinery that's used to process. So I'm just going to end up here and then talk about my report really quickly. So it's so important for SMEs to create a strategic action plan, and it can feel so overwhelming. You have to plan for tariffs. You have to think about investing local, think about promoting local, think about how can we look into our East and West distribution, and how do we adapt for long-term resilience. This is where the report comes in, and I'll put in the link in the chat. So I created the supply chain resiliency guide based off of the speaker series from April to June that focused on 6 key sectors: automotive manufacturing, agriculture and fisheries, energy, critical minerals, food and beverage manufacturing, wood, forestry, construction. And this is how you use the report on how to plan to combat tariff threats. So you flip to the page that it impacts your industry and your community. And you just look at the quick overview, you look at the key challenges, and this is a very quick way to kind of lower the fear and just take it in a visual manner. Okay, how can you plan for tariffs? How can you invest? And it just is bite-sized pieces for them, like businesses, to think about really quickly. And key things, if you want to like take it even more of a notch, is think a year. Okay, what can you do in a year? Because in a year, CUSMA is going to change. There's going to be a renegotiation. So that means, 1, look into your audit your tariff exposure. Talk to a custom broker so that you don't do it alone. 2, diversify your suppliers. Find at least one backup outside of US. 3, build buffer. Get stock for at-risk items. 4, tap into relief programs. There's one that just came out. Take a look. And then 5, communicate to your customers and look for alternatives if tariffs arise. And finally, we have the midterm to long-term action plan after that year. Continue to diversify. I know it costs a lot of money for Europe, Asia, but think of interprovincial trade. 2, invest locally. Strengthen Canadian suppliers and processor links. It's a beautiful space we have here in EDCO. Talk to people, because your friend is going to guide you through what they have in their community. Look at their community assets. 3, continue to build agility. Run those what-if tariff scenarios constantly to plan sourcing. 4, innovate. Look at high-value specialized products. Find things that you can really bump up that margin and explore new sectors. And 5, engage in policy. Join associations, prepare for that CUSMA 2026, and partner locally. So the call to action is, don't wait until tariffs hit. Act now and use simple steps to reduce paralysis. Resilience requires awareness, flexibility, investment, and partnerships. So let's build stronger together. Thank you for listening. Here's my contact. I'll put it into the chat, and now I'm going to give it back to Brock. If you have any questions, put it into chat. Happy to have a conversation afterwards. Thank you so much. Oops. There you go.
Thank you, Janet. That's great. And thank you for covering for me. I had sort of windows popping up madly in the background here as my system continued to reboot. So let me try to share my screen again. And
it's there. You just have to put it in presentation mode now.
Right. Perfect.
You're set.
So I think, Janet, no worries. I have no repetition. The stuff you've been doing in this space is great, and I'm looking forward to kind of learning more about the resiliency, the supply chain resiliency process over the next couple of months. I know we've got some things we're talking about together. So an amazing resource, an amazing set of tools, and thank you for all of the effort that's gone into that. And I'm sure there will be questions and discussions as we get to that stage of things about what you're doing as well. I just wanted to kind of reflect on what may have happened since the last time we got together. And I know not everybody attends every one of these sessions, but over the last couple of months, we've sort of reflected on this, what I've been sort of playing as the summer of Trump, right? That we've got these kinds of things that are going on, and we're in a reactive mode. We're sort of trying to figure it out as announcements get made or as policies gets rolled out. But now we're kind of coming to the end of the summer, and I think that things change a little bit. And one of the ways that I've sort of thought about the summer is that the summer was really, if we're in a trade war, the summer was a phony war. And what do I mean by that? Well, this is something that historians talk about a lot. So back in World War II, Germany invaded Poland, Britain declared war. We're going to have this big world war. But after the first week or so of a flurry of announcements and activity, nothing happened, right? Like this fall of 1939, spring of 1940, everybody's at war, but there really weren't a lot of battles. There wasn't any fighting because everybody rushed to kind of declare war, but nobody was really ready for war. And it took time to kind of figure out what was going on and how are they going to respond and where were they going to get their troops and all this sort of thing. And so historians call that the phony war because everybody was at war, but there wasn't a whole lot happening. And to me, that's how I kind of felt over the course of the summer, right? Like we had all these crazy tariff announcements, Liberation Day, all these things are going on. We had a big election in the spring, right? And this big debate about what's Canada going to do and elbows up and how are we going to respond. And then so we got Liberation Day, we got a new prime minister, and then things kind of went quiet for the summer to some extent, right? And that's a natural part of the summer process. I always sort of joke that the federal government really doesn't do much in the summer anyway. The House isn't in session. The MPs go back to their constituencies. There's this sort of sense that, well, we got to wait till September for the real action to take place. Well, now it's September, and my sense is that the phony war might start to be over. We had this kind of quiet summer, high anxiety for sure, lots of things to worry about, but not necessarily a whole lot of movement on the trade and tariffs front. And I think we can see that in a number of ways. And this is the first of a few sort of resources or news stories I'm going to talk about. And I will put some links in the chat as we go along. FDI Intelligence, UK-based firm, has what they call their Trump FDI tracker, in which they kind of record and kind of talk about every announcement that the Trump administration makes in the trade and tariff space. And you can see that, August was starting to be a little quieter on that front. Got a couple of announcements around tax policy related to energy in the US. The states took out a 10% stake in Intel Corporation, sort of trying to kind of gain some control over the semiconductor space. But this is a lot quieter than what we'd seen over the last few months with all of the sort of the tariff announcements. So folks in Washington were kind of taking some time away as well, and there wasn't a whole lot happening on that front. And so we did get this sense where, our businesses are kind of worried. They're struggling a little bit, but there really wasn't a lot of activity. And then as we got towards the end of August, we started to see a little bit of movement. There starts to be some things that are happening. The first is that the Trump administration has lost 2 lawsuits in a row over the tariff policy. Basically, U.S. courts saying tariffs as they've been implemented are mostly illegal, and that Trump might have to pay all that tariff money back. Now, this is going to go to the Supreme Court in November. I don't know how quickly a decision will come, but there's this sense that we talked in previous meetings about how the courts might sort of be the ones that ultimately weigh in on the tariff situation. And we're seeing some movement on that front in the US context, right? Like it's possible that the Supreme Court would say, oh no, tariffs aren't allowed, and we all go back to where we were in December. We can't predict what's going to happen, but it is a kind of an interesting wrinkle there that tariffs will be illegal, and the money that's been collected from tariffs will have to be returned to the companies that paid it. That's kind of an interesting prospect for some Canadian companies that may have been paying tariffs on behalf of their clients in the US. Here in Canada, I think we've also seen over the course of this week that suddenly summer's over, right? And the announcements are kind of flowing out quickly. And so we've had a whole flurry of things over the course of this week that I think are really worth starting to take a look at. And I expect that over the next week or two, now that summer's over, now that the phony war is over, we're really going to start to see a lot of things move. So the first big one, essentially on Monday of this week, was that the federal government announced the Regional Tariff Response Initiative. So $1 billion over 3 years. They're sort of describing that as $450 million in year one. And this is basically a series of business-oriented programs that have been rolled out through the federal government's regional economic development structures. So in Ontario, that means through FedNor and through FedDev, that there's going to be this whole series of programs that are going to be available to Ontario businesses. Now, most of these programs from the initial announcement seem to be oriented as loans. And they seem to be targeting those sectors that are most impacted by tariffs. So US tariffs in the context of things like steel and aluminum, but also Chinese tariffs, as Janet had mentioned, in the context of agricultural products, for example. And so we've got this kind of mix of programs that are just starting to roll out. We don't necessarily have a lot of clarity on what they all are. I'd love to hear from FedNor or FedDev folks in a few minutes if they've got some insights. But we did get a little bit of a hint on sort of later on Monday and into Tuesday as the Prime Minister made a second set of announcements talking about $80 million in tariff relief for Atlantic Canadian businesses. And I know we're not here from Atlantic Canada, but it was interesting in the sense that it gave us some initial insights into what the programs under the regional tariff response initiatives are likely to be. So here on the side of the screen is an info sheet that was released by EDCO. That's the Atlantic equivalent of FedDev or FedNor, which dives into a little more detail around the kinds of things that are going to be available through the response initiative. And so again, I'll put a link to that sheet in the chat in a couple of minutes, but we're starting to kind of see the specific details around what kinds of programs and what kinds of initiatives may be available to businesses in Ontario to kind of respond to the tariffs. And you can see in one of the bars there talks about who can apply for these kinds of things. They're suggesting that SMEs, that's businesses with less than 500 employees, Indigenous-led enterprises, and nonprofits that are working with SMEs. So that could include economic development organizations or chambers of commerce or industry associations, those sorts of things. So there's some sense of some of the resources that are starting to emerge now. And I think this is the sign of, the kinds of things that are likely to roll out over the fall. The final piece of the puzzle was really announced yesterday, and this is the notion of a series of mega projects. Now, this map on the screen sort of shows one organization's attempts to kind of predict which nation-building projects the Carney government was likely to fund. And yesterday we got an announcement around the first 5 major economic development initiatives that the feds are likely to put seed funding into. So the first of these is the liquid natural gas facilities in Kitimat, BC. The second is the nuclear facilities in Clarington. The third is upgrades to the Port of Montreal. The fourth is a copper mine, the McIlvenna Bay mine in Saskatchewan. And the fifth is the Red Chris copper mine in central northern British Columbia. So this gives us a sense of, the kinds of projects that the feds are likely to announce moving forward. Now, of these 5 mega projects announced yesterday, really only one is in Ontario. That's in the nuclear sector, in the Durham region. Some good news for GTA and for some of the kinds of activities that will roll out of that across the province. But we also got a signal as to what the next 6 projects might be. As the Prime Minister sort of talked about a few projects that just needed a little bit more tweaking before they were ready to kind of pull the trigger on or move to implementing them. Interestingly, a couple of these do affect Ontario more directly. So high-speed train corridor between Quebec City and Toronto. But also some of the other sort of aspects of building out the energy sector. A lot of this doesn't speak to Ontario directly, but it's going to kind of have implications for development in Ontario. Now, more broadly, the feds are saying they've got at least 32 of these projects that they're planning to kind of unveil over the next year or so. But this gives us a sense of at least where those first big projects are. And the approach that the feds seem to be taking is that there's going to be seed funding to start these things from the federal government, $60 billion for the 5 projects announced yesterday, for example. But then they're really looking to try to attract investment from the private sector to mobilize the larger activity around these projects. And that's kind of interesting because it does speak to one of the issues that seems to have been emerging in the economy as a result of the tariffs. And this is a little bit of capital flight as money has been leaving Canada due to some level of uncertainty. We can see that the last 2 quarters on this chart, for example, suggest a fair bit of money flowing out of Canada. The federal strategy seems to be to try to reverse that trend. Let's use these mega projects as a way of attracting large-scale investment back into Canada. And so you can start to get a little bit of a sense of what the federal strategy is going to be here. And so I guess I would say, in the context of this analogy of the phony war, we've ended up in a trade war that none of us really wanted to be at. But after a little bit of uncertainty and silence over the course of the summer, we're now really starting to get a sense of where the next set of opportunities, the next set of actions are likely to emerge from. And it does point towards some pretty substantial opportunities for some of our communities. Still a ton of questions and a ton of concerns, but at least we can start to see now what the Canadian response is likely to look like. And we can start to see some of the shape of the projects that we're likely to pursue in this nation building strategy that might help us overcome some of the worst impacts of the tariffs and the trade war more generally. So with that, let me initially just sort of open things up for questions, either for Janet or for myself, as we sort of think about what's come out over the course of the last couple of weeks. Is this changing people's feelings about where we're at, or are you excited about these projects that are coming down the pipeline, or worried that nothing was announced that directly affects your community? But what's the general feeling in the room at the moment?
I'll start.
Perfect. Thank you, Fran. I appreciate that.
So I'm in North Bay, and I'm finding in North Bay, Northern Ontario, is I'm finding that many of the companies, they just don't know what they don't know. That's what it ultimately boils down to, is that they don't know where to start. They're not familiar with navigating the complexity of what is happening, especially when the landscape keeps changing this quickly. So it's been an eye-opener for a lot of people to realize that they need to start engaging more with this aspect of business, of importing and exporting. And maybe even if they are doing that already and they have customs brokers, that they need to engage with them more and maybe learn more about customs compliance, certificates of origin. I mean, some of the elements that they run into where they don't know where their product's origin of manufacture is, so they don't know why they're getting bills that are high. They don't even know if their bills are correct. So, so if they're doing things such as exporting steel and not putting the actual origin and manufacture on it, and they're getting automatically dinged 200%, not realizing simple paperwork error. So it's definitely challenging times.
Interesting. And in that context, Fran, I mean, is the kind of the guidebook that Janet was talking about, is that something that could be potentially helpful for starting these discussions with your business?
Anything and everything would be helpful. It's we did some short workshops here called Back to Trade Basics, where it's because part of the problem we find, and other forwarders in the area that will, or that actually do sell freight in the area, they make the same comment. They say people in the region do not know how to control their own freight. That means the very basics, like what is an Incoterm, who's responsible for what portion of risk, how do I gain control of it so I can gain control of the billing part of it. It's like, you know, when Oprah Winfrey always said, always make sure you sign all your own checks. And so that you know exactly what's being spent. It's that whole education piece needs to be revisited for a lot of manufacturers or anybody that's exporting. Even like with the latest announcement about the de minimis issue, with anything valued under $800 going into the US, that they're no longer exempt from the tariff treatment. So the first thing I heard on even on CBC radio were from smaller shippers who said, "Oh well, I'm just not going to ship anymore because this is, you know, and you're selling a $40 piece, and for 35% you're afraid it's going to kill your business, or you don't know how it's going to get there, or you think the whole system's broken." Well, Canada Post has a process in place now to manage this when you bring it there. I mean, it's knowing where to turn and who to ask the right questions to. That seems to be a big problem right now.
Absolutely. Is anybody else sort of feeling that, wrestling with that in the same way?
You hear crickets.
I see a hand up. Sue.
Hi. So I'm with the municipality of Leamington in Southern Ontario. So we're in Essex County, and I'm on different cameras, so I'm looking to here but talking there. So sorry about that. So we're in the greenhouse capital of Canada, and I always, bring this up, but it makes us such a unique situation because we have great support, and Invest Windsor Essex and everybody, we've got the cross-border mayors, all those things. So our information flow is pretty good. Fran, if you ever want to reach out, happy to share some of those resources with you. And that way we're good. But what we're noticing in Essex County has got, all of the electric vehicle pieces, which has been exciting in the last 2 weeks. And I've never seen it in my years of ECDEV here, that so many more manufacturers are looking into different types of automation. So we have, our tool and die, right? Because the type of steel that's being used now back and forth, and how is that done? So they're all looking now into really trying to break into that greenhouse industry. And so we're looking to see, what may be manufactured in Holland, but can it be done here? So I think people are pivoting really fast here out of necessity. Because they're 80% or more automotive. So for here, it's kind of like that's the positive and the negative situation. And because I think we are a bit more of central, being a border area, we're getting a lot of really good information. So our agencies are doing a great job. And I think our businesses, like I said, I'm getting a lot of information about like innovation, different things, and that's been really our focus.
That's interesting that maybe partly because of a border community, partly because you've got a couple of really well sort of organized sectors, sort of clusters that are working together with greenhouse and automotive, that there's a lot of information sharing. It sounds like, Fran, in the context of North Bay, that there's a little bit of that connectivity or that focus is missing. The businesses aren't necessarily getting great information in a timely fashion to be able to make the decisions they're faced with.
There is information to be had, but the challenge is when the companies in Southern Ontario are working on a higher volume the majority of manufacturers. So the freight forwarders and custom brokers, they focus on those customers and that client base. That's of value to them. When you start to go into more northern regions, and that could be anywhere across Canada, and if they are seeing that, oh, you're only moving a container a month, a 20-foot, or a pallet a month, or maybe you're only doing one chipboard every 2 weeks or something that's going to South Africa, they are not going to spend as much time working with you on something, and they're less likely to basically answer the phone for simple questions. So that's where some of those challenges are as far as getting the client customer service feedback from their service suppliers are. So yeah, so we do our best to try and do a reach out to the various companies to say, hey, you know, we were going to do this session, we're going to explain some of the very basics, and here are the questions you need to ask, so that we can look at ways to helping them pivot or helping them source from overseas. Because you think in this area, when they're doing so much business with the US, it primarily extended from saying, well, they truck everything. For one thing, they've trucked everything for years. That's always been the mindset. I put it on a truck, it goes to Toronto, it switches docks, and then it goes to the US, and Bob's your uncle, and I'm all done. And my customer in the US pays for everything. It doesn't affect me, and it doesn't matter. And now, or vice versa, I can just call somebody in the US and get this part and bring it up to Northern Ontario. And the idea of having to source from India, or where we have like the CETA agreement with Europe, makes them very nervous, because they think, well, I don't even know how I could do that logistically. Like, is that a possibility? When they don't often realize it's actually just as simple, because they've always had this mindset of, I'm going to let the other guy look after it. I'm going to let the US guy look at shipping to me, and I'm going to let the US guy look at picking up my stuff. And so now what's happened is they're in this situation of, I've got to do this myself. And they're smaller companies that they don't have a logistics team in their department. The guy building the chipboard is also doing the bill of lading and the, you know, calling up the forwarder and doing his customs commercial documents and stuff. So it's pretty challenging that way for them to, it's not just pivoting where I'm going to source my stuff from, it's pivoting how I'm going to actually do that logistical end of it. So
yeah, and you sort of talked about that in the sense that even at the level of, you know, sort of declaring what their product is, there's still some confusion and sort of not recognizing, oh, we've got to, you know, fill out our CUSMA certification, or we've got to sort of say country of origin, that sort of thing. Janet, you've got some thoughts on this?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about like the role of customs broker that like I highlighted earlier. I don't know if it was mentioned and I missed it, but yeah, a lot of businesses, I feel like if they're not sure, don't do it themselves and quickly learn everything. It's just a custom broker is someone that you can go to and guide you through these. They know it. They listen to the news every day, and the person speaking in the YouTube video I posted is someone that like, yeah, knows what she's doing. So it's always good. If you need the contact, I'm happy to like bridge it to her, like share that, and then she connect you to who would be good for you, as well as like, here's like a list of like vetted customs brokers, and you can like see which one is in your community. But it's like, don't do it on your own, because you'll do it wrong. It's even worse, and you get dinged even harder.
But that goes back to the problem though, again, here is, for those that even do have their custom brokers in place, they can't even get them on the phone because the brokers are so overwhelmed with all these constant changes that are happening. You know, like even the company that I had worked for in the past, a custom broker for 14 years, I can't get them on the phone. So
it's interesting. So the Regional Tariff Response Initiative, this new program, one of the things it says it has funding for is expanding into new markets. You know, conceivably, that could include use of consultants, or maybe even hiring of staff to kind of be able to kind of take charge of some of these issues or oversee some of these issues. I guess we don't necessarily know a lot of details about how that will roll out, and I want to go to maybe FedDev to see whether they've seen any details on this yet. And she's going to stop attending these meetings because I put her on the spot last time as well. But Anne Marie, I don't know, as somebody from FedDev who's on the Zoom today, the Teams meeting today, have you got any information about how some of this stuff may roll out practically, or is that still to come from the feds?
Well, we're still waiting on some details because there were some additions, Brock, that were added last Friday by the Prime Minister as well. So the program opened up a little bit. The applications are available on our website right now for the Regional Tariff Relief Initiative. So there's the 3 different streams. There's a general stream that any business, any sector is eligible to apply for. And that's for support from anywhere from 125,000 up to 10 million. And now it's a little bit different than our core programming because we can actually assist with up to 75% of the cost, where our core programming is 50%. So with that, what the Prime Minister announced last week is that there's potential for a non-repayable portion for that. So that would be from up to $1 million for companies that have been affected. So that's kind of what we're waiting for details on. So that part's not quite available on the website. So stay tuned and keep checking back for that, or check with your local officer. With that though, companies have to demonstrate that they have at least 25% of their sales have been targeted by the tariffs, or they have to demonstrate that it has been directly affected by ongoing trade disruptions. So that can be any forms. It could be through purchase orders. It could be through the higher cost of supplies. You just have to be able to demonstrate that. And the other key thing as well is that they have to have been viable before March of 2025. So they had to have actually been a profitable business before that. We can take the expenses back to March 21st, 2025 if they are approved. And the projects can go all the way until March 31st, 2028. But I just want to make sure everybody's aware this is not liquidity. So this is not about, replacing those funds that are lost. This is project based. So it's just like you were saying, it's going to be about creating new opportunities, whether that be through hiring a trade consultant, hiring somebody to help with sales. It could be about automation. I know Fran was talking about our it was Sue, I think, that was talking about our companies are interested in automation. So that's part of it too. How can we make the companies more productive so that they can be more efficient and more cost effective, and maybe have that make up some of the impact from the tariffs? There's also a special stream for steel and automotive companies, and that has a little bit more, the rate of assistance for that can also go up to 90%. Again, but we haven't approved any of these, so I'm not sure, it'll be based on demand as well. But I definitely, if companies are interested, or, you have somebody you want to refer, I can make sure that Stephanie and Laura have the map of where your outreach officers are for FedDev, and you can circulate that, and that has all of our contact information up for it. There's 5 of us across the province, so and maybe at some point too, we can have some type of information session when we have more available as well.
That's awesome. And Anne-Marie, I have to ask, 5 of you across the province, big website, big program, $1 billion. Are you feeling a little overwhelmed? I mean, how's this impacting you at this point?
The response has already been robust, but again, we are waiting for additional details. So, then they will be available on the website. So you never know what's going to happen. But, we were hopeful that this is going to help companies pivot and try to make their way into new markets and create new opportunities. That's the idea. So, and of course, our core programming is also open for any companies that maybe are not affected by the tariffs, but are also looking at productivity improvements or automation, that type of thing as well. So
I appreciate all that information, and you have Stephanie and Laura. Maybe we can get Anne Marie or some of her colleagues on the spot for the next session to kind of dive more deeply into this, because I think it's going to be a pretty impressive set of tools once we know all the details. But appreciate all the work that's gone into it already. Anne, I see a hand. You contribute to this one, or take us in a new direction, or whatever's on your mind.
No, actually to ask Anne Marie, sorry, a question. In the automotive and steel, I'm assuming copper wiring manufacturing would be included in that potential?
Copper and aluminum right now, and as it stands, would go under the general stream.
Okay.
It's very specific about steel and auto. I know last time, and a lot of people were confused because in 2019 we had the steel and aluminum fund, but this is steel and auto, and then everything else will be under the general.
Okay, super. Because yeah, if words copper's being heavily impacted on some of that, so if there's any words of suggestion, that'd be a good one, I guess.
Okay. Thank you.
Some other thoughts or questions? I might see, and again, I'm not 100% aware of everybody who's on the call, but I'm wondering if there's anybody from Durham region, maybe even Clarington or somewhere close to the Darlington plants. So I'm just wondering if at the local level, people have a sense of how they can connect to some of these mega projects that are being announced. So anybody from Durham region that feels like they're in the loop or out of the loop and can share some perspectives? I don't see anybody stepping forward.
I'm
This
not
is the point
seeing
which
anyone.
I'm going to start to voluntold people. Let me maybe then pose the same question. I know we do have a few people from MedCat, from the Ministry of Economic Development, on the call. I see I've got Goran is here on screen one. I know there's probably a couple of others as well. As these mega projects are being discussed at the federal level, are you hearing anything at the provincial level? Has there been good sort of communications, or are we going to be sort of racing to play catch up a little bit on some of these kinds of issues?
Do you want me to bite on this one, Brock?
That would be great.
It's on our radar, but we aren't getting the connections yet. And as soon as we have something, we'll share. And I'm happy to reach out to my colleague that covers Durham to see what they're hearing. We've had mixed success and mixed involvement in the past. So like PowerCo and the supply chain on that, we definitely had involvement. So yeah, definitely on our radar, but don't have the connections yet on it. And I think the one thing we have to remember is sometimes as government employees, we find out when everyone else finds out, right? So the next, it's I smile when I see our friends from the federal programs, right? Like those programs are launched, and sometimes they're launched and we have no line of sight into them. Like we've had a couple that we've had more line of sight into, but they're still developing as we're launching, right? Like as we've announced. So yeah, it's been an interesting year that way. So, but I'm happy always to, keep that on the radar.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. There's always a little bit of that in terms of federal, provincial, municipal kinds of relationships. But I just wondered, since there was an invitation for the projects this time to apply to the federal level, whether there was a little bit of a different take on it. And it may be that some of the folks more directly involved in the nuclear sector were maybe closer to some of this as well. As we think about the next wave of these mega projects, the high-speed train from Quebec City to Toronto is an interesting one. Is anybody in Eastern Ontario sort of thinking about that process and what it might mean for them in the context of economic development or opportunities for local companies? Everybody's shy today. Daryl, I see you. You turned your camera on. You want to offer some thoughts on this?
Yeah, and Sarah too. I figured the two of us in Peterborough should probably chime in here. Sarah, feel free to jump in whenever, please. Yeah, I think it's exciting. I mean, quite frankly, there's a big buzz in the city. Just kind of understanding what's going on. Rightfully so. A lot of our businesses have heard this before, as they've said to me many times. So I think there's still some hesitancy, but No, I think, some of the conversation as it pertains to everything from station location to everything else is factoring in some other quite big decisions, Brock. So I think it's become a fairly large part of what we're looking at just in terms of planning and kind of strategy and everything. But yeah, Sarah, please jump in.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're thrilled. I was before this job at the county, I was with the Chamber of Commerce. So we were heavily involved for many years on trying to make this a reality. It's a game changer for our region. Honestly, things will change dramatically from an economic perspective by having that stop here in Peterborough. So we're already looking in Peterborough County of, okay, when they're at the stop, how do we get them out from a tourism perspective? Because that is our bread and butter in Peterborough County is tourism. So we are heavily investing in our tourism assets and also trying to think ahead about, okay, how do we get them from that stop out to, the different parts of the region so that, everyone's benefiting. So yeah, no, it's really exciting.
Excellent. And I guess it's one of those things, we've been talking about this kind of opportunity for years, and now it seems to be a little closer than before, but it's still until construction's underway, it's hard to know how to really respond at the local level, I guess. But interesting to think about the opportunities. Janet, I see you just added another, or recently added another comment in the chat. Do you want to share thoughts about it's a CBSA link?
Oh, it was me. So it was with Fran's comment regarding custom brokers, and I was like, here's some people to talk to, but I personally know one if you want me to make a reach out. But yeah, that's about me. But I'm not doing anything with high-speed trains. So would love to hear about it. Yeah, but I'm in Toronto. I see a lot of construction with the Ontario One line.
Maybe I'll pick up on one of the other things that came out of some of Fran's comments was the notion of the end of the de minimis program in the States. And I'm wondering if people are seeing an impact of this in their communities. And this would probably impact local handicrafts businesses, collectibles, small scale retailers that may be shipping online to customers in the States. So the de minimis exemption used to allow goods valued at $800 or less to go duty free to the States via mail. That's been eliminated. So even $1 in theory now pays both duties and tariffs. There was a suggestion that Canada Post has figured out a workaround. They sort of have. They partnered with Zonos, which means that if you're willing to pay the fees and the tariffs, you're allowed to send it to the States now. But this is obviously something that's going to impact a lot of small businesses, which we hadn't really reflected on much previously. We've talked about, automotive and copper and aluminum and steel and these sorts of things. But are you now hearing from small businesses in the community about challenges selling into the States, Daryl?
Yeah, I've heard from a few locally, but I think it's just something that's probably going to take a bit more time, a couple more days, weeks, whatever, for people to kind of be a bit more vocal. But what was just fascinating, this is actually a business in Toronto, but it's a little just one-off 700 square foot boutique that, I've shopped at in the past. And I'm in like an Instagram broadcast channel with the business. And so they actually sent out a message yesterday and it just said, hey, what's up, everybody? And sorry, I'm reading it from my phone. Just a heads up that my fulfillment team has notified me of a delay and recall on US orders. They're working on getting the best possible solution set up, but as of right now, all of my American orders are on pause. You can still order from the shop, but until things are sorted out, I won't be shipping any packages. So it's like, yeah, from an impact standpoint, like.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot of that on platforms like eBay and Etsy. A lot of people saying, "Oh, we can no longer ship to the United States." I know that Canada Post stopped shipping to the U.S., but so did the UK, so did Austria, so did Germany. So we're sort of seeing this kind of knock-on effect. And Zonos supposedly allows Canada Post this kind of a bit of a workaround, but Zonos doesn't bill for 30 days. So It will be 30 days from a week or so ago before local businesses know what kinds of fees they're paying to be able to ship to the States as well. So I think maybe a big heads up for folks that are kind of, working with those sort of mom and pop or Main Street or kind of online businesses, that this may be something that will require some attention in the next little bit. So Daryl mentioned he's got at least one business where he sort of heard this. Anybody else hearing concerns about the elimination of the de minimis rule and how it affects shipping?
Aside from up here with the comments from, just like even antique dealers or art sellers or any of those smaller boutique type industries, they don't really know how they're going to manage it. And the other problem with this, his suddenly removing the de minimis, is that in the US, the CBP and even custom brokers, there's no capacity to manage this. I mean, they have 93 billion pieces of mail come in a year, and I don't know how they would even try to manage this without resulting with this a huge backlog filling up in different warehousing locations. And yeah, the whole thing is just beyond comprehension for me. That's for sure.
Daryl, something else on this?
Well, I was just going to say, just building on that, and I think most people, know my background with Digital Main Street, and so the team there has been hard at work, kind of educating, because what's fascinating, I don't still say fascinating, but to build on what Fran said about the antique dealers and the smaller kind of folks, it's what we're finding is most of them didn't know what the hell de minimis was or meant, because they just were never crossing that threshold, right? So it was just this kind of like thing that was never a concern, and now all of a sudden they see an article that says, hey, this thing that never applied to us has changed, and now it's going to result in a significant change and increase in our costs, right? So it's almost like a larger re-education campaign too, because I think a lot of the public facing stuff is just assuming that everybody is an expert on de minimis and $800 this and that and everything else. So it's been a lot of conversations too, just on talking to a small business owner, actually explaining to them that, okay, here's what it was, here's what's changing, and here's why you're going to see that impact. So it's a bit of a mixed bag that way too, because not everybody does understand it, is what I'm seeing anyways.
Interesting. Yeah. And something else that's probably going to roll out as a bit of a checkerboard. I know that Stephanie and I and some others will be at the Ontario First Nations Economic Development Association meetings next week. And the Blackfeet Nation in the States is suing the Trump administration right now over these kinds of changes, because the Jay Treaty suggests that goods made or owned by Indigenous people are exempt from these kinds of tariffs. And so just this sort of checkerboard of responses and reactions and things that nobody thought about before the policies were put in place, and now we're going to have to kind of wrestle with on a whole series of different fronts. Any other thoughts? And I appreciate Janet to just put some more information about Zonos. This is the Canada Post partner in the chat. Any other thoughts or questions about things that have emerged over the last week or two within your communities?
I have one more.
Yeah, go for it, Fran. You're keeping us busy this week. This is great.
Okay. I don't know if anybody has some information on this one, but I'm dealing with one of the large steel suppliers, and we are all stumped on the U.S. surtax remissions order. Because that has changed also September 1st, and that is where you can actually apply if you fit into a couple of different categories. If you're in the steel, aluminum world wheelhouse, or if you're, I believe it's food or healthcare, I think maybe there's one other one where you can apply through your CARM portal, showing proof that you have paid these surtaxes, and you can apply to have some of those dollars relieved or refunded, or however it works, sort of like a duty refund type of program. So now elements of it has changed, so that now I guess the Canadian government has removed the non-core goods from the surtax. So, and then they have this remissions order that you can apply for has also been extended to March 2026. It was supposed to originally end October 13th, I think, of 2025, where you could no longer apply for this. But it's very confusing as to what exactly has been extended as far as the surtax remissions order to March, because it says it'll show in the website steel, aluminum chapters, if you fall under chapters 72, 73, 76, and then it'll say schedule 3 something. It's written by somebody who wrote the Enigma code in the Second World War. And but then you look at this chapter 3, if you can find it, and it only refers to the chapters in 98 and 99, which are miscellaneous goods and warranty returns and that sort of thing. Nobody can seem to clarify if the extension is only for these miscellaneous goods in those 2 chapters and warranty returns and things like that, or if it actually is extended for the steel and aluminum stuff too.
So yeah, it's sort of knowledge gaps and information gaps as we try to work with our businesses about how to navigate this stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, and when I was speaking to these logistics specialists working in this company, they have paid their $400 an hour to their customs consulting teams. They've even gone to their third-party vendors and their consultants, and they can't seem to figure it out. So I guess my only thing is to maybe go directly to our MP and ask them to talk to their Department of Finance and say, can you please write this in a language that people understand? Yeah. That's a big problem. It's a very, very, very confusing when you read that site, and even how to understand how to qualify, how to apply. It's split up between a couple of different websites, government websites. So
I think this connects to a comment that Leidy made in the chat, in relation to the de minimis stuff in that context. But this notion that businesses are confused and they just don't have the information to figure this stuff out. And so this Leidy's suggestion in the de minimis context, can we do workshops? Can we do these sort of knowledge sharing things? Is anybody seen that in their communities, or chambers of commerce or other business serving organizations starting to do some of this? Or is this a kind of a gap that that maybe we can be looking at?
The Ontario Trade Commissioner's Office has been doing some workshops. They did one the other day, and they did have a consultant from Livingston, gentleman out of the Edmonton location. And it was pretty good, but it was still pretty challenging, and there's still some head scratchers questions in there. But I just suggest that anytime anybody has a chance to watch any of the webinars, or I can even forward you, Brock, the one that I just saw, still has all the slides and the recording. Gives you an idea of what they're doing, but they're always offering something. But it's almost like we need to start pushing people take CIFA training again, or CITT or something. Yeah, it's just too complicated.
Maybe if you can forward that to Stephanie as well, we can kind of add that to either the white paper, or if there's a link to it that we can kind of share with the whole group. I think that might be a great way to kind of get that out more broadly. But maybe in advance of whatever session comes next month, people can keep an eye out for some organizations or companies that are doing this kind of training, so that we can maybe share start to put together a list of resources or sources of information that could be helpful in that context.
Yes, and anybody, if you find information or if there's items to share, we'd love to put them on our website. So we have the Trade and Tariff resource section, so we can update that with some of those resources as well.
I'm just sort of watching the chat. Dean, thank you for the kind comments. I threw an email in there. So he's asking for contact information, but I see that we're hitting the kind of the hour. There's a lot of folks saying thank you for the session. So I don't want to extend us longer than we need to. If you need to make your exit now, that's great. Otherwise, maybe I'll just sort of see if there's any sort of final questions or comments before I turn things back to Stephanie and Laura. Stephanie, you've got a request for your email address as well. So, right. Well, hearing nothing, I think hopefully this has been a useful session, and we've got some great information out. I appreciate the chance to share some thoughts. Janet, you gave us some great stuff once again, so thank you for that. And I'll turn things back to our hosts and organizers.
Thank you very much, Brock, and thank you, Janet. It's been great information, great conversations today. Thank you for participating, everyone. So we will do another session next month, date to be confirmed, and we'll send that information out through our e-bulletin. A couple shameless promotions. We have our final regional event happening on October 2nd in Rideau Lakes. We've got a great agenda there on building your community assets to attract investment, the workforce development, agritourism. And we also have a speaker from the Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade about the climate and the changes in Ontario's target markets, which will be a really interesting session. We also want you to save the date for our annual EDCO conference happening Monday, February 2nd to Wednesday, February 4th. And don't forget, the EDCO Awards of Excellence application is open until October 17th. So get your applications in early. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We really appreciate your support. And any way we can help, please give us an email. Let us know. We're here to help you. And have a wonderful day and a great weekend.
Thank you.